everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Granite Mountain Behavioral Healthcare, Power of the Mind, my favorite hour of the week. Madi, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to talk about family dynamics because I come from, it was just me and my sister growing up, but I come from, we have 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sparked this conversation of why are they all so different? And, we touched on birth order, and now you can dive us a little deeper in that, huh?
Yes, I am. We're going to talk about middle children today.
The middle kid.
Yes,
Okay.
the middle.
That's a tough one, right?
Absolutely. I think it's the hardest one, to be honest.
What makes it so hard?
So the middle children often struggle with feelings of isolation, but a fierce sense of independency, right? So they'll struggle being compared to the oldest and the youngest, right? They're usually self-reliant. So they're seen as by the parents like, well, they don't need as much.
Yeah.
But they still do.
I've got to deal with the baby, right?
Correct. And they, they're often the peacemakers too, which is a struggle because they feel isolated but have to fix everything. And the middle children often feel like they struggle with connecting because they feel like they have to fix it. If there's a problem, it's their responsibility. There's a lot of weight on them.
100%. It's funny because I look at our family dynamics, and we have the 3 girls. I always call them the new kids and the old kids because it's like we had, 2, 4, 6, the age 2 years apart. And then 6 years later, we had, the blessed boy. So with the 3 girls, it was always, Nicole, the middle kid, was the peacemaker. Like, oh no, and later when we had the new kids, she was the mama. She just kept busy and stayed with everything. And then my baby became the middle kid. And so she did get forgotten a lot. So it was just like, but she did her own thing.
Yeah. And they come across as like it's not just parents that go by thinking that they don't need the attention, is they show they don't with that fierce sense of independency. But yet their mind tells them they're responsible to fix it. It's like, I got to caretake the youngest, but I got to live up to the oldest. And they often struggle with thoughts of anxiety. They tend to struggle with anxiety a lot. They tend to struggle with codependent behaviors of feeling like I said, like I have to fix it. So the constant need to take care of is always there, and it continues on through adulthood because that's how they were raised. That's the dynamic that they grew up with. I have to fix it. And then you see a lot of middle children going up to be adults still carrying that forward of like, I have to fix it.
Do you find middle kids, because they have that mediator, I've got to fix this, I'm a caretaker, do you find them falling into relationships with kind of broken people that they are going to fix?
100%. They struggle with that codependency. And because they grow up with the thoughts that they're not enough, they're not seen, those core beliefs carry them forward into relationships as they get older. And because they have that core belief, their actions show that, right? Your actions match your core beliefs. Whether you want them to or not, they do. It shows up. And it continues to show up with them through adulthood, where they'll engage in relationships that are risky, where there's often domestic violence, where they are codependent, it's unhealthy, or where they can, and with being codependent, they put their needs second. And that shows up in relationships as they're older.
You're like a fortune teller. You're like sitting here going, oh, let me explain all, because I listen to you and I think about different stages of people or people I know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so right on the head, because it's, for me being the oldest, I was always in charge, and I always, my needs came before anybody's as a kid. And I, when you become a mom, those shift a little bit, but it's still, as a kid, I was in charge of everything. And my little sister was definitely the little sister. But I see those, like, especially when there's the three kids, because it's always 2 against 1. And I think the oldest one can influence the baby, the younger one, like, come on. And so it's always 2 against 1. And I remember that growing up with my, raising my kids, it was always 3 was hard.
3 is so hard.
3 is so hard. Yeah. Because there's always 2 against 1.
Always.
And it's usually the oldest and the baby. And now it's funny. My oldest and my baby fight all the time. And my baby is 23 years old.
That sounds right. Where they still feel like they have to take care of the baby. And where they still feel like their input matters.
Yeah. I think too, with the oldest one, it's like I had to figure it out on my own. And I was the first one and I had rules and I didn't get a car when I turned 16. And then the baby gets the car. The baby's like, oh, let me help you with your bills and let me do this for you. Cause she's the baby. Like what happens if I don't help her? And then the middle kid, it's like, if the middle kid calls me, I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong? My oldest and my baby, they call me and I'm like, if they don't call me, I'm like, what's wrong? I talk to them 10 times a day. But the middle kid, I talk to her. If I talk, she lives on our property. If she comes in the house once a week, I'm like, oh, hey, I forget. And it's still, and shame on us as parents, like for not figuring that out. And it's like, this is for me, I'm using it as the excuse. And back in our day, we didn't know any better. But parents, like, be aware. Because I messed up, and it's not my fault. It's science.
Absolutely. It is science, and it's difficult for these middle children when they have like, I'm going to give an instance. I have, I'm going to go by my family and my kids. So I have a middle child named Lexi and a youngest who's autistic named Sawyer. Now, with that dynamic, especially with the special needs, I have to take care of. I have to fix. And you see her caretaking, trying to fix the situation when he acts out, making excuses for him. And that's like a continuous cycle that you notice, and especially more with special needs as you add to that. But even without special needs kids being the baby, the middle children are like the forgotten children. And if you go by family dynamics and family roles, they'll be the lost child or the forgotten child. They usually like to read or they can entertain themselves so much. They look like and present like they don't need as much. Right. So it's easy as parents for us to overlook that because how they're coming across is, well, they've got it. They're fine.
I lost that child 10 times. I lost her at Disneyland. I lost her at the swap meet, which was scary because there's cars everywhere and there's people. Bet. And it's just, we would stop and then we'd start again to walk somewhere else. And she would just be in her own little world doing her own little thing. And it was like, we lost her in Las Vegas. And that was the scariest moment of my life. Oh, but and you know how I figured it out? I stopped to take a picture of everybody and I took the picture and then I looked at it because I had one of the cameras it wasn't a fancy cell phone. It was just a camera that you could look, and I was like, what a cute, where's Haley? Like 100%. And she had kept walking. But they are so like good at blending in. And, I had my large and in charge oldest that if she wasn't in the room, you knew it because it was like quiet and calm. And then the baby who always, you always know where the babies are.
The baby always needs something.
Yeah.
Constantly, even through adulthood.
This kid had to do cheerleading one year because that's what we did. We were a cheer family and and so she did it. And I made a scrapbook page for her and I was like, you're only here for the snacks because we cheered for a little football team. And then she's in her uniform eating a nacho. And I was like, she only does this so she can get snacks. She hated it. And finally she's like, please, I want to play softball. So I was like, okay. But so often they just do what you want them to do and they just blend and shame on us though.
It's so hard though, especially when you have like me, like with 3 even, like, the middle Lexi seems like she's so fierce. She's so independent. It's like, I'll show her how to do something. No, Mama, I got it. I can do it. Or I'll go to explain something I already know. Or I'll go to her and ask her how she is. And she's like, well, I'm good. Why?
Yeah.
Like always, I'm fine. I'm fine. Because they're so used to having to be fine.
Well, and I'm confused a little bit because when we talk about middle kids, I have the 3. And so at one point, Nicole was the middle kid. And she is fiercely protective, peacemaker, baby on the hip, helping with the littles when they came along. Gonna fix everybody around her. And then the littles came, which pushed Haley into that middle position. And she seems so much more like a middle kid to me because Nicole would always announce her presence. Nicole was always, the attention. Yeah. Where Haley, even though there was 6 years between Haley and Josh, she's definitely middle kid behavior. Very much leave me alone. I got this. I don't want to be bothered with all your nonsense.
Is she artistic?
She is. Yeah.
They're often artistic and very creative. And they love like expressing themselves through artwork, or they usually have an outlet where it's like something artistic like dance or coloring or drawing.
She's a collector too. She has her little collections of things that she, does. But it's so funny. So do you see that often if dynamics shift or what about blended families? So if you marry into a family with already kids and it's finding your role.
Oh yeah, you'll adapt to it. You'll almost like be put into that role, especially when there's that huge age gap where she definitely did become the middle. She went from the baby to the middle. But as her being in the middle, and you often see these behaviors, right? Like you notice that it fits. And you'll see like even though she was the baby, she was accustomed to the middle child because she became that. So if a family is blended and they come together, they'll take on that role of the family where you're at. And sometimes, everyone's like, is it always like that? Well, the majority of the time it is. Huh? There's always going to be those rare cases, but the majority of the time, the middle child is the fierce independent one, the one that's forgotten, the one that has it going on and knows that they can handle it. They got the weight of the world and they want to face it alone.
Yeah. It's funny. Her and I were having a conversation the other night and she's like, I wish you would have tested me back in the day. And I said, we didn't do that. Back 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't, ADHD was just becoming a thing. And it was just kind of like, oh, she's a little slower with her reading or whatever. But she's like, I swear I have, a little bit of autism in me. And I was like, no. She goes, how fiercely I'm connected to collecting and how I do this and how I do that. And I was like, I said, maybe it's just, your birth order and how because we were talking about it. And it's like, I don't know. And I said, you would sleep until you were hungry and you would eat and you'd go back to sleep. You were like the easiest baby and you just were there. You just did your thing. And when you have 5 kids and you've got a kid that just does her own thing, thank God, right? Because you've got so much to do. But parents, like pay attention because it seems like such a cycle that they all go through. But how do you compete with the oldest and how do you compete with the baby?
So I think that you have to put competing aside when it comes to parenting. And you have to come at it at an angle of like bringing awareness to it. And once you're aware of it, recognizing it and saying, what can I do about this? Like if I have a middle child, what difference can I make? Like how can I help them where they don't grow into codependence? Or how can I help them where they don't engage in these destructive relationships, right? Asking them, being vocal with them. What do you need?
Right.
That's a great question to ask a middle child. What do you need? And sometimes they're not going to know, but it's vital that you still ask. And once you ask, they know it tells them you care. It tells them that you see them because often they feel unseen, unheard, and unimportant.
Well, and they don't. Like I was thinking about while you were talking a little bit of like Christmas stockings. You always try to make them even, but if there's a little less of something, she always got the little less because she doesn't complain. Where the oldest is counting, like who got what. And, the baby is the baby. And with the middle kid, it's fine. She's fine. Not even she won't complain. She's not a complainer. And so I feel so guilty when we talk about it because as a mom, I'm like, man, I never put her needs before anybody else's because it was always, I was a young mom, so I'm going to use that as an excuse, but it was still, when she was our 3rd child and I was 20 when I had her. And so I didn't know any better. And she was such an easy baby that it was like, and she was still the baby. She never got to be the baby, and then by the time I knew what I was doing, that's when the 2 new kids came. And it was just, so I'm taking little blame here, but I feel guilty because she was easy. So I could lay her down and she would sleep and not.
But back then too, like you think about 20 years ago or so or more, like the level of awareness that society has taught us is a different phenomenon, a different level. We were not aware. We were not taught. Like, these things are just now coming to surface. Like, the internet is more accessible. Like, you're able to look things up. Psychology is more well known. Mental illness is more accepted than it was. So it's like, there's always going to be that guilt because we're parents and we love them. But meet that guilt with grace and understanding. We don't know what we didn't know.
Right. My kids will ask me today, how did you find recipes? I'm like, there were books that had recipes. We have a tradition at our house where we do the little handprints on the Christmas tree skirt.
Cute.
And it's awesome. But I learned it in like a Better Homes and Gardens or a Woman's Day or something. There was no Pinterest and there was no, parent blogs and there was none of that. We just flew by the seat of our pants and my generation wasn't raised. We were, and I never even thought about it until now when people are like, oh, Gen X, look at them go. They were not raised. And I was like, no, we were not. Like now, if my kid had to walk from here to there, we got in the car, we plotted the route, we let them know, like, you've got your cell phone, I can track you, and explained, and this was with my teenage boy, it's like, you're going to ride your bike home from school. You're big enough to do that. We're going to get in the car and this is a busy street. And even though the light turns green, you got to look. I was 5 years old walking home from school. And no one planned a route with me. It was just like, get home.
It was socially acceptable then.
Kindergarten.
Yeah.
Walking home from school. I don't remember, and maybe she did, but I don't remember my mom walking me out to that stop sign at the school and going, okay, you're going to cross here. And then you're going to go down till you get to our street and you're going to turn right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And think about this. There was I don't remember, maybe there was, but I don't remember there ever being any law that you have to be a certain age to stay by yourself when we were younger. It was just socially acceptable. It's what you did. Your parents had to work. You went home after school. Yeah. You took care of yourself. You made yourself an after-school snack. My kids don't even know how to cook.
No, I have a scar from, I think it's here. It's probably healed by now. Flipping chicken. I was 9 years old. And my mom had to go to a parent-teacher conference with my sister. I remember that day, and I flipped chicken, and it scarred me. And I was just like, oh, I got to take care of that. At 9 years old. And we just did that stuff. But so that is my excuse. We were not raised, and our parents didn't know what we were doing. What they were doing. We didn't know what we were doing. And now these moms like, oh, and I have kids. Good luck.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to mess them up. You're going to mess them up.
Oh, if you're not messing them up, you're not doing it. Period. If you're not messing your kids up, you're not parenting. Yeah. Because intentionally or not, we are going to mess up our kids in some way or another. The problem is the majority of the time, parents don't want to look at it. And it's like, you don't have to look at it with shame. You can meet it with grace and see, what can I do now? Now that I'm educated, now that I'm aware, what can I change? What can I do? And it simply can be just asking them, what do you need right now, honey? I see you, sweetheart. What do you need right now?
Yeah.
And so it's becoming educated, becoming aware so you can know. Because stuff is so much more easily acceptable, but this stuff isn't widely spread. You don't learn it in schools. You have to be willing and ready and receptive to learning. Which in the mundane, life is busy and sometimes it's really hard.
Well, and Haley's tastes are so different from, she's into anime and different things, and she knows words in Japanese, but she tells me all the time, thank you for listening to my crazy. She'll go on a rant about something and I just listen, okay. And, I remember her hanging posters in her room, and she's like, it's funny because it was these two boy characters and they were kind of entwined. And she was hanging it. She goes, Mom, is this straight? And I looked at her and go, oh, honey, that is so far from straight. But she's like, but thank you for accepting me for who I am. But it wasn't until she was, later in her teens that we actually communicated, and we, I took interest in the things she was doing because it was so busy. Life was just so busy. And those type of kids, like you said, adapt so well to just being.
And they can often be hoarders. I forgot to add that in there. They can often be hoarders because they attach to things often. And they struggle getting rid of things because they hold the memory. to them.
She tells me everything holds a memory for her.
Mhm.
Like everything she collects is precious.
Mhm.
And it's all very much and she's one that will go to a concert by herself. I was like, she goes, oh, I want to go see the show. Or she'll have a friend online, which blows me away. She makes all of these friends online and they all meet in Phoenix to go to a concert. I'm like, you're going to get murdered. Like, what are you doing? She's like, no, I've known these people for 10 years. Like, but you've never met them. But that's her, that's how she's adapted. That's how she's done her thing. It's just crazy to me.
Isn't it bizarre how they are? They'll just form and it's so funny because you often find that middle children won't date middle children.
Oh, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So where are they most attracted to, or where do they?
It depends if they want to heal those unchild wounds where, like, let's say the unhealed child wounds is I'm not seen. So they'll usually end up with a baby. Someone who's the baby, who knows they're seen and needs to be taken care of to meet that need again, to carry it on because that's what they're used to. Or the oldest, but usually it's the only child.
Okay.
And they'll date an only child. Usually they do very well with the only child.
So my husband's a middle child and he married an older child, but the oldest child, but he needed that. Like, but he wasn't, again, that's a whole thing, but they weren't really raised at all. So Gen X to the extreme, but yeah, he was, but he needed to be healed. And I mean, but
he's a feral child. He's
feral. Feral is a perfect word.
So he ended up with the oldest because he still needed to be taken care of.
And huge attachment issues. It's beyond. But 35 years later, and we're going strong. But
I love that.
It was definitely like, I know I couldn't have married an oldest child. It would not have worked. And I don't want to marry a baby because I don't want to have to, I'm not that much of a nurturer where I'm like, oh, it's okay, sweetie. Like I need a strong man, but I didn't want because my dad was a very dominant personality. So I wanted something a little different from that, a protector too. But
that's healthy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Very healthy that you looked for that. That's actually really healthy. You looked for that.
I don't even know that I looked for it. I remember seeing a picture of him and he had a baby on his lap and he had his hand like on the baby's shoulders. And I remember that was the first picture I'd seen of him. And I was like, look at those hands. They will never hurt me. They will never hurt anybody. Like they're protector hands. So weird. But it's like healed. That's my guy. Like I knew the first time I saw him, but
he's your safe person.
He is, but he's middle kid too. That likes to be by himself. Very artistic, very let me do my own thing. He always tells me you're the one person that I talk to. Lucky you. Like he doesn't have a lot of friends. He, a friend from his past called and he was like, oh. I was like, you got to take the call. Yeah. You got to see what's going on. He's like, I don't know. Fine. And so he talks to him about once every 2 weeks. Frank never calls him. It's always, oh, he called. And I was like, we could talk to him. He knows where you guys grew up. He knows that life, but he's very much a middle that he'd sit in his room still to this day and listen to albums or music or,
Creative. Very creative.
Yeah.
They have a very good imagination also.
He'll listen to music and he doesn't know the words to the song. And I'll be like, how you've heard the song a million times. He's all, no, but listen to this drum solo. Listen how it it was like, it's so cool how he hears the music and he not the words. And it's funny. Middle kids are special.
Very, very.
I never thought about it that way, but they are very special.
Very independent. And I think that as a parents, as we're becoming more aware of it, we can teach them these skills and by using words of affirmation. Usually that's their love language, but they don't, but they go to the opposite of it because they don't seek it. Right. But words of affirmation are usually their love language.
It's funny because Haley will walk in and she'll be, kind of prancing around a little bit. And I'm like, oh, you look so cute today. Thank you, mommy. Thank you. She still calls me mommy. Thank you, mommy.
I love that.
And Frank is one that he, Frank will always be the one that's, don't tell me, show me, or don't. When I was at home a lot, he'd be like, I'd be like, look what I did today. And he's like, okay. And now that he's home more, like, we didn't even notice I cleaned the baseboard. So I'm like, oh, okay. You did a great job.
He needs the
So,
recognition. They need it.
Yeah,
And
they
that's
really
a good
do.
thing he can ask for it from you. That's healthy.
Yeah. It's gotten better. He was a crackpot when we got married and it took some time, but yeah, it's on an extreme, but yeah, it's so we've learned middle children special. They liked projects to fix people, artistic, loners. Interesting. What are we going to talk about next week?
Youngest.
Babies.
The baby.
That'll be awesome. I'm excited. I'm excited for the babies. So, well, Matt, thank you so much, Madi. This is my therapy every week. I love talking to you. And you guys, thank you so much for tuning into Power of the Mind. I just have a blast with you.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.